Hello and welcome back, and today I'm going to continue looking at Plex Media Server on the brand new range of Synology NAS. Today it is the turn of the DS720 Plus. Now this is quad-core based NAS. It's an Intel Celeron based NAS, a J4125 with 2 gig of memory. I've not upgraded the memory and I am not utilizing SSD cache. There is SSD base based into the base of this device, and later on in the video I will be enabling that cache just to see if there's any performance benefits. As you can see, I've not enabled the cache. Later on we will be seeing if that makes any difference whatsoever. We're also utilizing the base level of memory. There's only 2 gig of memory inside our device today. We could have upgraded it to 6, but we decided to go for the base minimum. And the last disclaimer is, in terms of Plex Media Server, today we are utilizing, let's go into the NAS in question. Let's go into our general dashboard. We aren't using the latest version of Plex. The reason being that we have noticed, and it has been highlighted to us once again, our man Takeo, and again I'm sorry dude if I'm butchering that name, about this business of the video driver, the encoder being used by Plex not being the best one, and there is means to delete it and take advantage of that and use the default, much like you would in VideoStation. But that's for another video. Today we're using the vanilla box and then comparing it with the vanilla box with SSD caching, and then later on we'll do a test in another video where we edit those drivers. But what we're going to be looking at today, as you may have seen right at the beginning there, we have got transcoding enabled. Let's go there, go to make my CPU hurt, because we are using a Plex pass, and we've just enabled that there so you can see that it's happening. And we're going to go into the dashboard so we can see CPU and memory utilization of this device in real time. Now, many of you may already have noticed in the bottom of the screen a separate video here that's showing the utilization of a laptop playing these files. It's the only way to truly show you guys the playback without using a screen recording software, because I don't have the GPU power in this device to make sure that comes across fluidly. So I'm sorry about the picture-in-picture. I'm also sorry about the multi-screen setup I've got running here. I might take a picture later on and post it on socials just to show you guys the setup I'm working with. But what we're going to be running with today is we've got a mobile phone as well that's going to be playing files. I do still have it set for when we were doing a previous video with a different NAS. So I'm just going to switch, as you can see there, over to the 720p. Go to the film section, and much like our other video testing, we're going to start small and we're going to go ahead and play a 720p file. We're going to go with the matrix. This is a 720p H.265 file. I believe it's not even 1 full megabyte per second, or megabit even. Let's go ahead and click play. It'll ask us if we want to carry on from where we left off. No, this won't, because we've never played this file on this NAS. As you can see, it's going to play it fine. If we open up the visual settings there, you can see it's 0.7 of a megabit per second, 720p HD file. And again, it's weird to describe the Matrix as an old movie. Blows my mind. If we fast forward a little bit, go to hopefully an area with a bit of outside. There we go. A bit more light there. And the file's playing fine. We can see the bandwidth spiking there as the file gets accessed. But what we've learned from our previous tests is largely that bandwidth only really kicks in once the CPU and the memory have dealt with the file. So sometimes we'll be dealing with larger files, and what you'll notice is the bandwidth will be 0, but these will be massive. The reason being that the CPU has to deal with the file, then it will send it out. And if the system is struggling with a file, almost certainly the bandwidth will be very, very low. Now, as this file plays, what we're going to do is open up the same file of the matrix here on the mobile. And again, we've played it there. It's resumed from 53 there. And we've got the same file at roughly the same area in the film, as you can see there. And we can see that spike in the bandwidth as the file has been accessed on a different device. Now, the CPU has barely done a thing. It kind of blinked a little bit, but that's about it. So what we're going to do is leave that file playing on the mobile. And again, I wish I could rest that against the screen, but this is touchscreen, unfortunately. I'm going to be going down here, and now I'm going to start transcoding. So first thing we're going to do is transcode to a higher bit rate. So this is a higher bit rate. Let's have a look there, not the bit rate, the megabits per second playback even. and we've gone up to 4 megabits, still 720p H.264, and the CPU has barely batted an eye. And bear in mind, we're still watching the file here on the mobile. I pop that over to one side, don't want that too close to the mic, otherwise we get a bunch of static. Now we'll scale down to a 780p file, and again, there's doubled the bit rate, but we have lowered the resolution in case we were utilizing this in a limited network bandwidth environment or a device that doesn't support 720p. You know, Christ guys, that is not big. If we move down, we can go, let's see what 240p plays back. And of course, this is going to be a lot more work to go down to something that small. It will play it, and look at the pixelation of that 240p file there. But it has managed to convert a 720p down to a 240p file if you're on the commute or on a train. But look at the CPU utilization there. And if we skip forward, we're going to see another spike there in utilization moving forward. And again, we've still got that very low res there happening, and the CPU utilization is spiking once again. And all the time, this movie is still playing in full 720p here on the mobile phone. It's weird that this mobile's got a higher res than a laptop, right? So let's stop playing that file on the mobile. We'll stop playing that file here on the PC. And now we're going to make our way into another video file. This time, just like before, we're going to follow the same routine. We're going into Little Shop of Horrors. It's a 1080p file, and that's H.264. Going to go ahead and play. We're going to let it play from the beginning. We'll open up the visual there. As you can see, 1.9 megabits per second H.264, and we'll leave that playing there. We saw a little bit of bandwidth spike, obviously, as we access the file, but that's about your lot. And once again, we will play back that file simultaneously on the mobile phone. There's Little Shop of Horrors. We're going to click play. It's working with the server. And we're going to start seeing that spike. Let's have a look. Still on the 720p. For some reason, that file did not play immediately, which isn't what I expected. Now, we're not seeing any issues there, but we did see a slight network flag there on the phone. So I think that might have been a network hiccup and nothing to do with the NAS, because look at the bandwidth spike there. It is playing back. Let's skip forward on the mobile phone. And then at the same time, we're going to skip forward in the movie. So we're running on both of them native. We're not doing any kind of transcoding there on either one of those devices. We're seeing the bandwidth there, and they're playing fine. So we'll leave that running on the phone simultaneously, and now we'll continue doing our mucking around. So now we're going to convert that to the original 1.9 megabits per second at 1080p. Let's move it up to a 12 megabit per second, so higher frame rate, or bit rate. And on top of that, we're looking at 1080p. So 1080p still playing there, running absolutely fine. I'm not seeing any spikes. We've not seen any drop in playback on the mobile phone. That's running absolutely fine. We are watching a movie that has dark areas, unfortunately. I kind of wish I could play the music right now. Unfortunately, you know, YouTube rules. But I've got to say, I love this film. And anyone that hasn't seen this, if this video you're watching now makes you watch this film, it would make me a happy man indeed. But let's carry on and convert down. Now we're going to go down to the areas where we started to see problems last time. So we're going to go to 720p, 2 megabits per second. And we're not really seeing any hiccups this time. It's still seemingly running quite well, which is good to see. But now if we start moving down, we can start looking at where the work has to start happening. So this is the 480p file. And this is where we're starting to see the Plex NAS start to have a bit of an issue. Because remember, we're still playing back this file on the mobile phone happening right now. Every time I say mobile phone rather than mobile, I do feel like an old man. But pushing forward, we're starting to see that it is struggling with this. Even if we try to skip forward, it's not letting us. Now, if we switch it back to the original playback quality, it plays like a charm. So again, there's something about that transcoding down that's too much work for this system to be working on. So if we go even lower, chances are we're going to hit that same problem once again, where it's not going to be able to convert that 1080p file down to 480p and 328p. Now, I know a number of you, let's stop this playback now on both devices, a number of you would be wondering why on earth would you want to watch a glorious 1080p file at 480p or less? And the simple reason is, when you want to use your phone, you might be on a data plan, you know, with your mobile phone provider, you may well be utilizing a device that has a limited internet connection or has limited codec support. And by the way, yes, I am filming this by the seaside in my office, and that noise is infuriating in the background there, so I apologize for that. I might go out seagull hunting later, but let's carry on and move forward, because that's one of the main reasons you would use a smaller file, because you might be using mobile devices like on a train or the commute or something. Now, let's move forward and have a look at some of those dense files. These are the troublesome ones. These are the files where we have some real bother. These are the ones where when you try to use them, let's try and get the list mode done. We want to get as many on screen as possible. These are the files where you are using raw assets a great deal more. Now, we're going to keep the resource monitor here on screen, but it's this one on the right that you're going to see flip out. Now remember, the green is Plex, the red is the NAS. Same goes with the memory, the purple is the NAS, the green is the Plex system. So what we're going to do is go for something nice and light. We're going to go for, let's go for this 3 megabit per second, and that's an H.265 1080p file. Now, as that plays, let's talk through some stuff. Now, H.265 on this NAS, as you can see, it's automatically gone to a convert. Now, this is something worth discussing. H.265 on this NAS in Plex has a bit of a bother. And a lot of it is to do with the driver that Plex is utilizing. If you use the Synology's own Virtualization application, it will play that file. If you looked at our video for the DS920 on our Plex Media Server tests, it did astoundingly well compared to Plex, because Virtualization still has access to the default driver. It doesn't use the modified driver inclusive of Plex. We will be doing a video, I promise, I know I keep saying it, where we're going to go through editing the background drivers. But the reason I haven't done it yet is I want to do all of these Plex tests on these NASs in their vanilla state. And to do it now without doing it on the vanilla state will be fairly unrepresentative of people who want to buy this NAS who don't want to edit that kind of file. So that's why I've not done it yet, guys. I do apologize, it's not happened yet. Now, the H.265 or HEVC, otherwise known as H.265, is the one that there's a lot of bother with. To put it into perspective, if you have a look, that was a 3 megabit H.265 1080p file. But now we're going to move up to a 100 megabit per second, same file, but way higher megabits per second. But this time it just happens to be H.264. And see, it plays. It's a denser file, it's a way bigger file. In fact, I believe the file size is considerably bigger as well. If we go into the file station here and we have a look at our Plex library of files, let's go into the test files there, we'll be able to see just how big some of these files are. To put it into perspective, H.264, if you have a look, that's 10 meg, but the one we're playing is 350 megabytes, but it's still played better. And that is because of that niggling issue of H.265. And again, that isn't just 8 and 10 bit rate, 8 and 10 bit files, sorry. There's more to it than that, which we will go through in another video. Now, if we carry on, we can make our way into the bigger file types, because there's that 100 megabit file that played, you know, pretty fine. We saw utilization spike. But if we look at the the H.265 variant and play that file, so this is the H.265 version of that exact same file. It's trying to do a forced transcode. You're going to start seeing that going up there and that spiking, and it has managed to play it with transcoding, but it's still not playing perfectly, and this is just a 30-second file. Now, the fact that this is a 30-second file is definitely something I want to talk about, because I'm running these small tests just because to have this sheer weight of different file formats is just near impossible, and every file type is different. The reason I'm running 30-second files is simply because they were the easiest ones to obtain for this video. But one of the interesting facts is, if we go back to the size of those files, you'll see that obviously the lower codecs, if we go by size, you'll see that the smaller file types seemingly, let's get that extended, the smaller the file type, the smaller the file codec. So it's 3 megabits per second, and as the megabits per second rise, a lot of that's to do with frame rates. The frame rate there, as they increase, the file sizes increase too. But all of these files are still 30 seconds long. The result is that each one of those files has to push more data per second. Now, looking at these files down here, that 400 megabit per second H.265 10-bit file is 1.4 gigabyte, and that's 30 seconds long. So if that's 30 seconds long, and that file is this one here at the top, that means that it's pushing a huge amount of data per second. And for buffering and transcoding, the system just cannot buffer quicker than standard time. That is how long it takes for 1 second of video to play. Now, at the end of this video, I will play this file and how it plays in Virtualization to show you what I mean about native transcoding and native drivers. But moving forward, let's go into the 4K files. These start at 120 megabits per second. We have two variants. We have the H.264 and the H.265 10-bit. So if we play the H.264, we play that file there, we open up the transcoding engine, and it's not transcoding. It's trying to play back at 200 plus megabits per second frame rate and at 4K. The buffering is happening, but as you see, it's only buffered 5 seconds so far. And whether the playback will outdo the buffering is pretty clear. We're seeing the CPU work a little bit there in the background, but I think we're not going to see a success here. Now, if we try to transcode this file, we'll go for convert automatically, and we let the system work on that file in the background to convert it into something a little bit more manageable. This is still an incredibly dense file here. So it might be able to do it, but it's still going to have to use a fair old chunk of resources to do it. We can see that it has buffered up to here, but that's about your lot. And that buffering is representative there of the bandwidth you can see at the top. But we're already seeing that it's starting to give up the ghost. It's trying to convert it down, or at least convert it up to a bit rate it can play, but it was not successful. This time, we're going to play the file, pause the file, and try to transcode it down manually. So we're going to go down to 4 megabit per second 1080p, 720p, and let's see what the system does. Now, pausing that file, I don't know if you noticed, when I paused the file there, it did start to transcode it, but that's not a fair representation of playback, having to pause the file so it can buffer. No one wants to pause a file, particularly a 30-second file, just to watch it. As we can see, it's going to try to play back that file, and the buffering has reached here, but I don't think we're going to be successful here with our playback of this file on the 720p. Oh, look at that, proved me wrong. It has played back this H.264 file. Now, the buffering ends here. I don't think the buffering's going to win. The buffering here, no, it looks like we're going to lose. The CPU, no, it's just caught it, but no, it's going to give up. It gave it the good old college try, and you've got to respect it for that. But the buffering, it's just, it can't outweigh that buffering factor. Now, that same file, just before we end things, this is the 10-bit H.265 we've been trying there that it managed to convert. If we move forward, we can look at the 200 megabit, and again, this is going to be the 264, that's the 265, so let's play the 264 first. Let's see if it can attempt this big old file. And it's lining it up. It is lining it up. It is not trying to transcode. The CPU and memory is still going a little bit bumpy, We're seeing buffering down here. The buffering is up to here so far. Although where that's going to live versus the playback, we're not sure. I don't know if we're going to be successful with this test. Again, we will be enabling caching shortly. I'll have to cut recording and come back to the caching. But no luck at all. And again, if we switch over to the H.265 10-bit, we're almost certainly not going to see playback of that file. Now, we'll let that carry on and do its thing. It's going to give that an attempt, and it is, of course, going to force transcode there. But there's no way it's going to be able to convert without. But it's gone down to the 200 megabit, but it's still just going to a lesser 4K there. But ultimately, it's not going to be able to transcode that file. And this has never been a NAS that was meant to be designed for 4K transcoding overall. 4K playback perhaps, but even at this high level, we are still talking about a huge amount of CPU resources being used. I mean, look at that down there. It's a real lion's share of resources being consumed here. So I think we're going to have to give up the ghost, because although we are getting buffering, it's happening at such an alarmingly slow rate with just a 30-second file, and there you go, it has given up the ghost. And of course, we can try and go for the big guns. Let's try and play that giant H.265 10-bit 4K 400 megabits per second file. It's had to go straight into a transcode, but even then, it's just not doing it. And we can see the CPU and memory utilization has shot up dramatically. The volume utilization is relatively slow, which would suggest that the caching isn't going to help us that much, because the hard drives aren't the barrier here. That's the problem. It's the CPU and the memory. And I think when we enable the caching, this will be proven. But this is not going to go for this file. We can try and go for the transcode, but no, it can't even handle that. Now, while we're looking at this, just before I enable the SSD caching, what I'd like us to do now is to log back in to the Synology NAS here. It'll put us back into the desktop. I'll just log in. Again, I'm sorry if my voice seems far away from the mic. I am running a 3-screen setup here, and I've got all kinds of gubbins going on simultaneously. We're logging in to the device. I've had to lean around about 3 tripods here. Now, while that's going on, what I want to show you now is Virtualization. Now, I already did this with the DS920 Plus, but I think it's worth revisiting this subject. Let's skip all of that. I've not set up any of the folders yet. Let's go into the NAS. Let's find that folder. Let's add it on Virtualization. So this is with no extras. This is literally just adding these files now. And it's going to index those files for us and play back those files. And once that indexing is done, it's now going to find those files for us. And again, it's going to add them gradually over time. And the one that we're waiting for now is that enormous file. So there we go. We've got that 120 meg. That's that 10-bit H.265 file. And while we're waiting, let's play back that file. Now, it's worth highlighting, hardware resources are going to be consumed while this device is indexing. So that is going to be indicative of what we're doing right now. But remember, this is the 120 megabits per second 4K H.265 10-bit file. We're still seeing utilization, but this time it's played the file. And this is my point. It's not played it perfectly. There are buffers. And remember, we are still indexing files here in the background. But it's the fact that it was able to play this file that's interesting. So right now, for example, playback quality, it's on full. But we can scale it down because it's already scaled there. We can scale it down to medium pretty easily. It's worth highlighting we will need system resources in order to do that. But it is still playing back better in this scenario. So we're able to convert files a little bit better than we could on Plex. There's still the buffering issue of buffering being overrun by the speed, but it's still able to play back that file. It's definitely not playing it back perfectly, but it's playing it. Now, if we come out of this file, go back into Video Station, and this time we're going to go for that giant file here. Remember, the indexing is still happening in the background, and that is a 400 megabits per second 4K UHD H.265 10-bit file. And again, as mentioned earlier, this is a weighty file at 1.4 gigabytes for 30 seconds. Now the system's going to have a think about it. It's certainly utilizing lots of the memory and lots of the CPU power in order to do this, but it's going to be interesting to see whether, as we can see here with the file being transcoded and played there in the background, it has transcoded it in the background to FHD at still a high bit rate for us. It's struggling, but Video Station is playing better. So what I'm interested to see is what's going to happen when we enable that caching. So I am going to kind of sever the recording here where we go into the caching advisor, because once you add caching, it will have to remove the hard drive from access for a short period. But let's create our cache, read-write cache. We are utilizing the Seagate 510 Iron Wolf's NVMe SSDs. We're going to do read-write caching. We're going to go ahead and enable that caching area for us. It's going to wipe the SSDs while we do it. And now we're going to create our area of cache. It's going to create that in the background. And what I'm going to do now is fast forward to the completion of this SSD caching being made. As you can see, it is unmounting the storage drives. The storage pool has to be unmounted. So now the Plex Media server has been temporarily disconnected, and we're going to fast forward to it being done. Right, so as you can see, our caching in the background has now been completed. It's running there. We've got the two SSDs in a RAID 1 read-write cache environment. So let's run some of those tests again. We've got this here on screen. And remember, we've still got Video Station to revisit as well. I've had to refresh a lot of these pages. But no, simply because when you do create an area of cache, you end up having to dismount the hard drive storage for safety's sake. As you can see, memory utilization has increased, and largely that is because of SSD cache and its requirements towards memory. So that may be a factor, given that we're using a 2 gig of memory NAS here. Now, in a future video, we should really look at increasing beyond the vanilla state, but let's carry on. You can look at the caching actions down here at the bottom, but I do think we're not going to see hugely different results, because it was never really volume access that was the problem. It was CPU and memory. But nevertheless, let's go on the slightly top end files here. Let's move up and go straight into an H.265 10 megabits per second 1080p file. This is where we kind of saw the early problems, and let's see if that caching is going to be helping us in any way at all. I believe the system is going to go straight into a convert. Sorry, wrong tab there. And it has seemingly played it. It has helped play the file a little better than it did previously, which is quite interesting. Let's go back. Obviously, interesting is relative. Let's go now up to a 100 megabits per second H.264 file, and then we'll go the H.265 afterwards. It was able to play this file before. It did push the system somewhat, but as we can see, it's playing back that far. The frame rate does seem a little lower than I would like, but again, that could simply be my laptop. Let's go for that same file in H.265. Let's see if that SSD caching has helped things along in any shape or form. But we are looking at that horrible orange loading bar, which is never a good sign. And if we have a look, we are seeing buffering. The buffering is done, and it has converted it, but it has seemingly played back that file. Now, who's to say how much SSD caching has assisted this? There's no buffering or background conversion that's taken place, but we can't ignore that that might be a factor. Let's move into the 4K files now, and we're going to go for a horrendous 120 megabits per second 4K UHD H.265 10-bit file. Try saying that 3 times as fast. And it's gone straight into the conversion there. And we're going to see what this NAS can do with that file. Again, as mentioned, I didn't really think that SSD caching was going to help us too much here. But what will be interesting to see is if it provides absolutely any assistance in terms of Video Station afterwards. And of course, we will be doing dedicated Video Station overviews on all of these NASs as well. As at the time of recording, we've done the DS220 Plus, but the 920, 720, 420, and a bunch of those new QNAP 53Ds are all in the works. We're just getting Plex done first because that's the one you guys ask about the most. But the system has seemingly not played back that larger file. Let's try the H.264 version of that file. We should see a bit more success there. And again, it should, yep, it's playing back the original file format. I'm looking forward to showing you guys this video about changing that video driver within Plex. But again, I just want to get the vanilla videos out the way first, because let's face it, this is the setup you guys are going to be running in a number of instances. But CPU and memory has gone down. The buffering is up to about here on that file. It's still not great, but we are seeing the struggling there on that file type. No, hasn't given us anything, but let's go straight to that big file. This is the one that had all of the nightmare bits. It had the 4K, it's got H.265, and it is 10-bit. It is the perfect storm as far as this NAS is concerned. It is its very own Everest, and unfortunately, it doesn't look like we're going to see the summit. No, we're getting a little bit of buffering, a little bit there in Plex, but at this buffering rate, if you were to play back any file larger than 30 seconds, you'd be lucky if you get to the title screen. So right now, I'm going to call that a big fail, even with the SSD caching. Even the CPU and memory has given up the ghost there. The cache is working a bit, but of course, caching is going to be more utilized in light buffering and regularly accessed files, not something we're going to be utilizing here. Now, let's make the switch over to Videostation. As mentioned before, we've set the Videostation up for the first time, and it was able to play back some of that 400 meg file. So now let's go to the 120 megabit per second 4K 10-bit H.265 and play back that file. We want to carry on from the beginning this time, and we're going to play back and see if caching has helped us at all, or if it is largely immaterial. I would say it has definitely improved the speed at which that file has been retrieved. That, you know, it took a little bit longer last time to play back this 120 megabyte per second 4K H.265 10-bit file, and I'll be honest, I'm getting sick of saying that. But it is playing it, I believe, at full bit rate or full HD. So it has had to do some transcoding, and it has improved performance as it has proceeded. Let's go now up to the 200 megabit per second H.265 nightmare file. And let's carry on there. And again, 10-bit H.265 4K 200 megabit video file. It's going to do a bit of work there in the background. You could look at these charts here, stop looking at the Plex side, and you can see those spikes, but it has seemingly played back that file, and the caching is bouncing around there in the background. Remember, we're not running anything else on this NAS right now but this process, but it's worth highlighting that the memory is spiking quite badly. So you are going to have to factor that in if you are looking to get a NAS and include SSD caching for your performance. But let's end this video on that 400 megabit nightmare file right there. Let's play from the beginning, and let's take a good long look at the CPU resources and memory utilization, both of which I reckon we're going to see very, very top end stuff. But it is playing this file back, and it is playing the file better than before. Still not perfect. Remember, this is top end 4K we're talking about right now. But ultimately, I would say that SSD caching has assisted things and has improved things and resulted in an overall better performance of Videostation. Plex, less so, because I think Plex is going to come down to removing that video driver, something we'll talk about in the next video. But let's end things here, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. There is more Plex tests to come. I do look out for those. If you do want to find out about those, do click subscribe. It helps me and also keeps you in the loop. Click like if you've enjoyed this video so I know it's what you guys want to see. And visit the links in the description to both span.com and NAS Compares. I will see you next time.